Selectors! Welcome back to the Life Force Podcast. We're doing the last video in the series of the 06 Confounded DIVA. So we're doing the best of the rest. This is the one that we do all the time, where we go over all the last videos and we talk about, hey, here's what's left of the decks that we're updating. Now, as per tradition from last time, I'm not doing all of them updated. You know, I can't do it, guys. I can't keep up with every single Elrig that exists, but I can keep up with most archetypes anyways. So that's where we're going to be talking about with this type of thing, which I updated last night. So going into set 8, here seems to be the breakdown of where things have sort of landed in terms of the tier system. I'm only going to briefly go over this because I'm trying to make it not the longest video in the world. It's still going to probably end up an hour. Where you'll see that there's nothing in S tier anymore, but Deus, Atomic, all this stuff has sort of fallen into A tier. That happened last time. X, DXM aggro has fallen a bit here. I've actually put it above discard at mid-range. Now, DXM is still a very super strong deck and absolutely worth running and crushes some matchups, but has some harder times now that there are ways to deal with Assassin and there are ways to deal with Elrig attacks, right? There's a lot of ways to basically get guards for 6 turns in a row nowadays. So it ends up falling a bit from that. Tomago is still holding on to being a good control deck in the tier A deck. Tama discard has sort of taken itself up a notch here, especially with ultra superheroes, which is coming out. Tama midrange or Tama aggro has would have dropped if it had not gotten cards. So it basically maintained its status quo in the A tier deck. It's gotten a lot of cards that make white aggro pretty good, and you're going to see that this white aggro shell is basically going to stay the same for 3 or 4 more sets now, without really changing very much. Outside of that, we have Aya. Aya's gone way up. Aya is the de facto tempo, blue tempo deck of the format, if you'd like to run it. Again, there are other blue tempo decks that exist, but I'm just saying, like, once you end up having one deck that does this niche better than generally all the other ones, or maybe more widely appropriate, it just will drop all the other ones. That's, for example, why you see Umir here as farther down. Now, Umir is a Death and Taxes build, not necessarily a straight-up tempo build like Aya, but it ends up dropping because it's like Aya's taking its niche very, very much so and leaving it with very little to work with. So it's dropped, you know, again, like you're going to see a red aggro with Enterburn here with Yuzuki being the second one, which has gone up a few placements. And that's why you're going to see Hirana with red aggro burn dropping very, very far into this because of that. So then we got Madoka. Madoka's gone through another transformation too in the meta. A lot of people play this sort of Elrig lock deck, where you're playing Umir clear and you're playing something else to lock down Elrigs. It's actually probably more like this right now, but you could play it as a white and Esper deck too, and no one would fault you with peeping. And it's pretty good. It's a little worse because it's sort of caught between, does it enter starve or does it hyper discard? And Aya does that a little better, and Tomago does that a little better. So it ends up being kind of further down on the line because of that, but it's still got a niche that it can do that other decks can't do. Speaking of Tomago, it has changed to an Esper deck as of this set. It's like usually is blue and black, but with Ultra Superheroes offering so much power in such a little package, as you'll see, it's definitely worth switching. Moving right along, we talked about Umir. So we've got the 2 new decks here, Iona and Yuka Yuka. Yuka Yuka Control just sort of plays like probably a worse version of Tama, but it's got a little bit of a niche, you know, with its green backing instead, that you can place it at least on the tiers, I think firmly in B tier. Iona, I'm actually very firm about pretty B tier. It doesn't do, it sort of like has a little bit of identity crisis where it kind of plays similar to Tama, kind of plays similar to Tomago, kind of plays similar to Bang. So it has kind of a sort of thing where you could do a lot of these ideas maybe stronger in other decks, but it ties all of those ideas together in a deck that not very many other decks can do, which is why I ended up putting it in B tier still. And these tiers are always suggestions, and then we see where they shift later, because they do actually 100% shift, as we've seen. Aya skyrocketed while the other ones sort of fell down. We've got Tama control combo mid range. So this is the white green Tama that uses that does like sort of like explosion of Elrig damage at some point. It still exists. It's not super great. I wanted to top it into C tier, but it's still so borderline in C tier, B tier that I left it in B tier for at least one more go around. And then Lion Endless Punchline combo. So it's kind of interesting. There's a lot more efficient mill now. I should stop clicking. There's a lot more efficient mill now. So it ends up still being bottom, right? Like, but it still has that niche where you are playing several Elrig attacks basically for free. It has a pretty powerful Elrig lineup. So it ends up still being just barely above B tier, just because it's like nothing else can really take its niche from it. Tama really does threaten its niche, but not quite totally. No one's really playing the things that are knocking it out. Realistically, you need to mill 15 to 16 in a game in order to actually efficiently destroy Tama's endless punchline, or sorry, Lion's endless punchline combo, which most decks don't. So it ends up holding on. Most decks will mill you 10 and then try for the 20, and then you can kind of stop it. So if you end up playing the 20 mil deck, yeah, this deck should go down in the future. So let's move along into our C tier. I'm not covering these decks. These are just so that you guys know they exist. Akino 2 is a defensive mid-range deck. It's chair list. He does his Esper list that I think is actually really good and gives you a different play than Tama, but in his own words, it is a very hard deck to run, and it's not super popular, so I ended up putting it into C. But like, if you were a proficient pilot, it probably goes, up into somewhere in B tier. I just wanted to put it out there that it does exist, and credit totally goes to Chair. He's been piloting this one for a while. We've got Musica Cosmos aggro. This has stayed the same. Nothing's really changed in it. Hirana red with Enterburn, it's fallen, and then next set it will fall off completely, and Hirana dash Hirana will take over, and will end up in probably A tier or top B tier, one of those two. Then you've got the new Eldoria Atomic deck as well as Miko Miko Atomic deck. It's basically the same thing, guys. Like, I mean, you're using an atomic deck, so it's atomic, and it probably ends up. I should put down the black as well in there. So Maho Maho Resource Denial has actually crept up a little bit. It was at the bottom of C tier. I put it a little higher. I think it's still a perfectly fine option. You could change out this white for red if you wanted to. It's a tempo deck. It's pretty cool. Hirana Good Stuff's mid-range is falling off very quickly. I think when Carnival comes out next set, it will fall off completely, and then Carnival will sort of take its place, probably hovering around upper C tier. Ott is still doing a very unique thing that most decks aren't necessarily doing, which is just this World's Reverse and this once per game that it has. So it sticks around at the bottom of C tier. It honestly does get better every set because there's more classes for it to choose from, but then ironically gets worse because it hasn't really power crept very much. It is a green deck at the end of the day. Senga number 2 has actually stuck around in the what do you call it, in this tier for forever as the top deck of this tier, and that's because it just keeps chilling there. Like it still can be played, and it still can be pretty good. It gets some bits and pieces here, but nothing to ever push it suddenly to the top. Deus midrange white black has dropped dramatically from like B tier basically all the way to D tier. That's just because the Esper decks do what it does better, and it's just lacking a lot of stuff. Noah 2 soft control chills at the bottom. Still a difficult deck to play. Still something that you could play. There's a lot more grave recursion stuff that's actually pretty good to play with Nova now, so it's hovering in the same place that it used to. Pure Luke has dropped a lot. There's just a lot of decks that do what it does, the shenanigans that it does better. Real is still there. I actually wanted to drop Real completely out of the tiers, but it's only there due to sheer representation. People really like the Real character and are playing the Real deck regardless of its power, so it ends up chilling here. Tomago Freeze deck chills at the bottom here. It hasn't gone anywhere, but it's pretty close to dropping off. There's been some freeze cards that are getting upgraded in set 8 and set 9, so it's worth watching. Again, this is a set 8 tier list. This isn't a set 9 tier list. I don't know what set 9 looks like. I have guesses, but they're nothing more than guesses. So, excuse me while I clear my throat real quick. Talking a lot will cause that. Hey, so here's the decks, right? And if you want to see all the decks, of course, you can always click the Life Burst podcast on any deck list you see, and it will take you to this profile that I have here. And you can see all my deck lists. We're just going to run through them in no particular order. If you were to go deep enough in here, you'll find set 9 stuff. Shout out to Hellfire for this awesome website, getting better and better. It just keeps evolving and becoming awesome. But the fact that we can now tag what our sets these are supposed to be in is like, mwah, chef's kiss. Awesome. You can check by, you can filter things if you click these. You can filter them by the set that you're looking for. So if you're looking for cheaty set 9 stuff, or you're looking for things that are coming out right now, you can do that. Let's start with Madoka Lock, right? That's the last one I made most recently. So we are here with a Madoka deck. So the interesting thing about Madoka is that this is sort of like it does 3 things very well. It mills your opponent, which is sort of a side benefit. It discards your opponent really well, and it also happens to keep your opponent's Elrig down for a little while. Like, just 2 turns, right? We're not going all in. You could have thrown Peeping in or something if you really were like, I'm going all in on locking down the Elrig. There's some cards that have Life Burst that also lock down Elrig attacks. This isn't that deck. This is just like, I'm delaying you 2 turns, and that should be enough for combat math to go into my favor. That's the niche that it has that makes it unique versus these other decks. Realistically, it's doing that with Umir Clear, which has got the ability to freeze an Elrig, as well as her ability herself, which says you can choose one of the following. And you basically are always choosing to freeze target Elrig on the opponent's stuff. You can discard through the main deck. You've got more than enough power to discard, so you should be fine there. Outside of that, you need to make up with the fact that you are taking less damage from this, which potentially in normal decks, not versus Tama, not versus aggro, means that you're just basically replacing guards with its ability. But you need still ways to defend against Signy attack, so that's where we end up with Can't Stop Pretty, just being able to cover our butts there a little bit, as well as the Machina Smash. And then that is the Elrig deck. Summer Lives Blues is just an exceptionally strong piece per always. Nothing else really has been upgraded. I'm kind of missing the loss of Firefly Squid here. Notre Dame is a worse card overall, but is a fine card regardless. The fact that Notre Dame can also curb your opponent's draws is pretty nice if it sticks around, because it does mess with their flow, right? And as a discard deck, if you can mess with their draws, that's beneficial to you. So it ends up being pretty good. It's a little less powerful than I'd like. You can put it back into the field down, which is kind of nice against certain aggro decks, especially aggro decks in set 9 that are going to be coming out. But yeah, so the ability it works with this is just discard, as well as the 3/3 split you're looking for is usually that plus a ZR. ZR will open up lanes and also make your opponent discard cards. But you can also run things like Modem or Valaris to help deal extra damage. Another Animirage, for example, to help deal damage. We have a little bit of, just one failure to help us get that damage output as well. On top of a suite of discard with random drains and stuff. I actually took the Tama stuff here with 3 Neon Tetra and 2 Bradamante, just because we needed more blue. This is a very blue-heavy deck, and I wanted a little bit more supplement turn 1 discard. You are always going to be able to basically get some turn 1 discard because of Monomin, but just a little bit extra is kind of nice too, especially if you hit some of these freeze freeze effects, then you can go ahead and throw Bradamante out there for that type of stuff. Overall, just basically a discard deck. I'm glad to have 4 Hakat back in a deck. My decks have been missing Hakats. They are unlimited deck filtering, but most of the time when you're playing these 3 colors, you'd rather play Yuki over the Hakats just because you want more proactiveness. And Hakat has aged just a little bit, not a ton of it. But yeah, that is the Madoka deck. So swapping into here. I bet you if I just click the Life Verse Podcast thing here, I can actually maybe do this a little bit more efficiently. It takes a second because it needs to load up all of the Life Verse Podcast decks. So maybe that's worse. I don't know. We've got the Tama combo deck. So we're kind of starting at the bottom, working our way up. So Tama combo deck is a little bit of a mess, but it works. It just seems a little strange. You've got Hanyo to give you more Enter. You've got Mel Revised to give you more Enter. You've got Energy Door to give you more Enter. Can you tell there's a theme? You've got a lot of this blue gives you more Enter. The Newcomer Bang is you discard up to 2 cards from your hand and enter charge 1 each day. If you're not running Monomin or stuff like that, the cards in your hand, especially with this deck, because you do get extra cards, can just sit there and rot and not really do very much. So Bang giving you Enter, aka 2 Enter, so you can attack a second time with your Tama is pretty important, right? So it's important to have some amount of Enter charge in this deck. You are trying to attack multiple times with Tama. You're trying to use its once per game action to attack up to like 3 times plus your Elrig attacks with your Kome, right? And that's your that's the main draw of this deck, is to be basically using Kome as a combo piece to be attacking multiple times in sort of the similar vein as MC Lion does, but like with a little bit more utility that you can get, you choosing your own colors, for example. Yuki helps to sort of just, end things proactively. I've gone up from 2 Yuki to 3 Yuki in pretty much every single deck that I'm running. Picture frames, these are also part of the combo piece with Komai. We've explained it before how that works. And then to top it off, you're just looking for some threats that you can do with your 3/3/1s that help, right? Generally speaking, your 3/3/1s are going to look like something like, or 3/3/2s, which will include picture frame, right? This is a deck that is very happy to do a 3/2/2 instead of a 3/3/1. And picture frame is part of that. The other part might be, I don't know, something like Cheerin or whatever. It doesn't really matter. But if you're doing 3/3/1 splits, predominantly your 3 is going to be Komai, so you're going to try to find 3 3s that work well with your Komai, right? So Exia works well with your Komai, ups your Komai so that way it's defensive and is able to play well on your opponent's turn, because Komai has an ability where you can bring something back. You can bring it back for 3 Enter. I don't know if you're going to have the 3 Enter in this deck. Amino Acid's actually a really good one because it stops the Machina from affecting your board, basically. Especially if you end up with a Amino Acid, a Komai, and a picture frame. You're not going to get Machina'd out of that game. And then the last one is if you're trying to really support your several Elrig hits, then there's nothing better than Remember, because Remember will allow you to hit multiple times. And it will also tax them for every hit, which is pretty good. So that's the deck that is the Tomago deck. Let's go back and we'll go to the next one, which is the Umir Death and Taxes deck update. So Umir Death and Taxes update, really pretty much the same deck as last format. Nothing's really changed. The only thing that's actually changed, again, the idea with Umir Death and Taxes is this whole idea of let's go ahead and put out a Hastilic and charge our opponent for Enter, or charge our opponent for existing, basically tax them, right? And then you take advantage of that tax by using things like Madoka Break or Yuki Dijon, which will allow you to really sort of now that their resources are stressed, take advantage of it. Nothing's super changed here with the exception of we've added a few Hyacinth. This deck really does need some more Enter than the other decks do that are tempo-based. And because of that, we slimmed down the costs a little bit with it, but Hyacinth will help you hit your Madoka breaks more efficiently. You'll be running a Tomago because you just kind of want more discard fodder and more discard fodder at different turns. So Tamagos allow you to do that, plus they're a big-ass wall. I mean, it's 20k power, right? Which is nuts. And also some failures to pair with it. We needed a little bit more push in this deck than the other decks because it can't 100% claim an open lane. So we're running some Hamlins and we're running some failures to help us sort of get over that hump. And that's the Umir Death and Taxes deck. Still very strong. Yuzuki Enter Burn. Here we've got actually a pretty major upgrade. So one of the things that we were missing with our Yuzuki Enter Burn, a lot of people were playing white in the deck in order to play Go to the Top. Death Beam is just currently better than Go to the Top, right? Like, it allows you to basically play a blue L-Rig and a red L-Rig. And what you're looking at, if you're doing that, is for 2 Enter, you can burn the opponent's Enter, but 3. So it's actually better rate than Go to the Top is. And then you also get to draw 3 cards, right? And that's really, like, draw 3 cards, choose the best 1 card in your deck. Those are comparable, especially because if you pull out Silver Bullets, you can win the game a little bit better. But this is actually fairly pretty good, right? This will allow you to potentially Phalaris out an opponent, especially with Umir Clear basically being mill for your opponent, right? If they've got 6 cards in hand, then they have to ditch those, draw 5. You're milling the opponent 5 plus a 10 Phalaris. That's enough to kill them, or at least deal damage with them. Plus, you do have some mill support here with Tama. Not a ton, but a little bit. So that's the main change of the deck. Nothing else has really changed. You also are running Yuzuki in Yuzuki, just because it's fairly good, right? You're converting that Enter that you're going to gain. You're going to gain Enter Charge 2. To being able to convert it into also milling your opponent out just a little bit more with their Enter. Enter burning them out. So overall, I think this deck is solid now. It was really lacking a strong piece here, but a Death Beam really comes in and solidifies that very well. So I actually really like this. I do like what black adds to the deck. I do like that black adds the ability for us to play Assassin through things. I do think you need Assassin if you're playing red nowadays. So I like where Yuzuki Enterburn has fallen because of that. All right, let's get into some of these other decks that are a little bit better, or I should say more top tier. We've got Aya, right? Nothing's changed from Aya. It's basically the same old deck that it was. We changed out the Enter a little bit here, like our Enter, we got some more Enter from here, some more Enter from Hyacinth. This feels like too much Enter. It feels like you could cut a Hyacinth. I just didn't know really what to put in here instead. Potentially another Failure, I guess, but I want to maintain 18 level 1s. I really just want to play 18 level 1s in pretty much every deck that I'm playing nowadays. The real big change has been, yeah, you can add some Failure. And again, the deck needed just a little bit more damage push, but that damage push is mostly coming from this card now. This card is a level 3 that allows you to, at the beginning of your attack phase, target one of your opponent's Signy and discard up to 3 cards. If you discard up to 3 cards, you can give it negative 3,000 for each card discarded this way. And then it has an Enter ability. If you've got 3 or more blue L-Rig on your, or blue Signy on your field, you can draw a card. So here's the deal, right? Like, this card is actually a little less strong outside of a mono blue deck because you are trying to play Yukimi quite often as your, or Gaybog, or both as your level 3s that you're looking to do. So this is more often better in a 3-1-1 scenario or a 3-2-1 scenario. Once you get into those 3-3 scenarios, 3-3-1 scenarios, you're probably playing Yukimi and Gaybog, but you're probably playing something else. So this still ends up being like, yeah, it might not draw you with the card, but the discarding a card, you end up in the scenario with Aya where you have 6 cards in hand and the opponent has 0 cards in hand, and you aren't looking to mono-min them anymore. You're looking to actually deal damage and close out the game, and that's where this card will really come into play. So this card will, you'll play it less than you expect, but you'll want it as a 4-of so you can get access to it. So that's the Aya deck. Nothing's changed too hard there. It has gotten better at punching holes into the opponent, which is great. Whereas the Tomago deck has changed, or the Tama deck has changed quite dramatically in a very, very simple way. If you look at the deck list itself, it's still playing pretty much the same that it used to be playing. I've slimmed down the Enter costs for this deck quite a bit because it's just like, it gets Enter starved if you play like microtransactions. So you'll see realistically, almost nothing in this deck costs Enter, right? Like the only thing that costs Enter is Random Drain, and then Koella if you need it, ZR if you are looking to open up some lanes, and then that's it, I think, right? I'm not missing anything? That's it. So I've slimmed out a lot of the Enter costs to take out those micro transactions. I've actually put in Akinos here, and these are sort of placeholders. They aren't amazing, but they're actually pretty okay here. Generally speaking, they're going to be white Enter, or they're going to be just something you put in the lanes, or something you discard even to monomins. But against the other control decks that are stripping away your hand. Generally, those might have 6 cards in your hand, especially like the Aya decks. They might end the turn with 6 cards in their hand. This allows you to get some value out of those types of plays. And you'll be able to get some cards back into your hand because of it, right? Just make it harder for your opponent to discard. So generally speaking, really nothing's changed outside of just slimming down the enter costs of our main deck. But the big change here that we should talk about is Ultra Superheroes, right? Ultra Superheroes is ridiculous. In almost every deck you're going to see it run, it's going to be an Esper deck. It's going to be a 1 cost. Look at the top 5, take the best 2 from it, put it in your hand. Those can be guards, for example, or spells, and then mill your opponent 10. So it's basically reads, take your best 2 cards out of the top 5 and refresh your opponent 1. It's fantastic. It's a shit ton of efficiency in 1 card. So you'll want to play this if you're going to play any of those. I think this is a fantastic card and probably the main reason why you're going to see a ton of Esper in your future. It's just efficient, man. It's just efficient, and you're going to have to get used to playing that card often because you'll see it a couple more times before we're done our video. So we've got Tama aggro here. This is what we've upgraded, right? So I've changed out almost the Elrig deck completely, and we've changed out a lot of the not Elrig deck completely. I'm realizing now that this card is a set 8 card. You can just replace this with maybe some like what I did earlier, which I just replaced it with some amount of those Akinos. You can replace them with some amount of Akinos. I'm not going to go through this deck and just replace it right now for you. It's totally a fine card to replace. Just find some level 1 that works here. You can also potentially replace it with the Todorisas, so that way you can get some enter back when you play White Heaven. All right, let's get to it. So I've taken out the white Elrig damage, which was, I'm trying to remember her name, Anj, completely. I've replaced it with Donna. And then I've replaced Lion with Akina. So what I found was that just by being a little bit more enter efficient in this deck here, specifically the Elrig deck, I never really ran out of enter. I was not having as much enter problems as I was having earlier, and Tama was allowed to really shine because of that. Her ability to up her and be sort of like end game reach. So I swapped out Akino for it because this is just cheaper, right? It does sort of the same thing. I lose 1 damage opening thing from Akino, but I'm gaining more damage opening in the main deck, so it's less needed. The next thing that I did was add Donna. Now, Donna is an interesting one, right? So I'm not using the coin Donna. I'm using the Donna Go For It, which is look at the top 4 cards of your deck, reveal up to 2 signia that share a color with your center Elrig. That's all of them. Add them to your hand and put the rest on the bottom in any order. So it's just basically, it's equivalent to Dig. It digs 1 less, but that's fine. Because what we get from here is Donna Glittering. Now, Donna Glittering is a difficult one to play. You basically have to say, I am a deck that's always going to have cards in my hand, and if I do, then this is a really cheap way to block lanes. It basically costs 2 enter to block 2 lanes. Granted that these enter abilities do not activate when you're doing it. Yes, it's got an enter ability of 3 draw 2 cards, look at the top 5. You're very rarely going to play that. That's sort of one of those ones that you're like, yeah, that's a bit too much. But I'd rather have it be 3 enter to draw the 2, and 2 enter to put a Signy out than the opposite. Basically, this says 2 enter, as long as I have cards in my hand, I can block out 2 lanes no matter what. Plus, there's actually quite a few things in the deck that, even without the enter effect, are actually pretty good. So for example, a lot of these have auto abilities that you're looking at, and they're just helpful on your turn. But some of the stuff, like for example, Toyoki is just a big wall, right? And that's something that we're going with. You probably could put more Toyokis in here. You could probably swap 1 and 1 out. Then you got Zhao Yun, which has Shadow, Exia, which closes down lanes, Coella, which allows you to stop sort of abilities. And also, just remember, is pretty annoying on the field in general. Plus, Love Dobby is just huge, right? It's a 14k, so it's huge. It blocks everything, basically, with the exception of, a Remember. So you've got a lot of annoying things that you can put on the field with this effect. So don't sleep on it. It's Donna glittering again. As long as you have cards in hand, it's pretty good. Going back into the main deck, like I said, the thing that was really changed here was that we have more damage in the and more efficient damage coming from our main deck now. So for the first time ever, we don't have to just completely rely on the Elrig deck for mono white damage. We've got a word card, Blessed Wisdom, which at the beginning of your attack phase, if there's 3 or more white Signy on your field, you can target 1 Signy on your opponent's field with power 3000 or lower, which is monomins. It's okay at level 2 to power 3000 or lower. At level 3, it gets a little bit more dicey. But level 2, it's perfectly acceptable because they will have level 1s that are 3000 that you can hit with this. So this is generally speaking a turn 2 play, whereas this is generally speaking an any turn play. The fact that this can bounce a level 1, which is almost always, again, our 3/3/1 fields are the most important, so really up till turn 5, going to find a target, and enter charge you 1, so it's basically free, is huge in a deck that needs the enter like mono white. Outside of that, we've just played sort of annoying Signy, right, like the Koella, the Exia, Penlight. Penlight's actually really good and is getting better. It basically screws over Tama. That's its main goal. We're not really easily getting guards in this deck. I mean, outside of maybe getting a guard back from here, but that's pretty rare. So it does actually support the deck pretty well and kind of can change combat math a little bit against the aggro decks as well. So major upgrades for the mono white deck. It gets more upgrades in set 9. As you can see there, I didn't swap out that one card. Line combo. So I don't think I made a set 8 one now that I'm thinking about it, but you can take a peek into this deck. It basically runs the same thing as it used to. The only change being is that actually Akino is a really, really good card here. Now, Akino is a pretty situational card, because when it attacks, if the opponent has 6 in their hand, then you get to do its effect. The fact is, its effect is something that this deck is craving to do, so another level 1 that's not Haniel and doesn't have a life burst is huge for the deck. So this may be bad in a lot of scenarios, like you're going to play against aggro, but it also may be good in scenarios, and just that alone, having the ability to potentially be good, is really worth its like salt in this type of deck. So I'm happy that it exists, as well as Over Pursuit is a pretty good inclusion too, because again, this deck struggles with enter sometimes, and just having another bounce that is in its colors, that's huge, white in its colors, and can enter charge you 1 is really, really, really nice for the deck. There's some other cards in there that are set 8 or set 9, but you can ignore those because, again, we're looking at set 8. May even, here it is, so set 8. I knew I had it. I knew I had it. Basically the same deck, just a little bit different. So there it is, set 8. Let's go back and see the other ones. Boop, 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 boop. Okay, so Bang. Nothing's really changed in Bang. For a hot second, I considered swapping over to Donna, but then decided I didn't have enough card draw really for it, so I was just going to stay with MC Line Disrespect. Not a ton has changed other than it gains Bang. Bang gains Bang. Unironically, a lot of the decks that have the centers and the memorias be the same are wanting those same effects. So this just gives you a little bit more early enter charge that does help with Parajulius turns. So we like that kind of thing. Outside of that, not really much has changed in this deck. It's basically the same deck as before. We're running a few more green Lubidor type Eins. You'll notice there's no pastas in here, and just only lines. And the reason why is I never really wanted the pastas on my 33 turns. I didn't really care to get the extra removal either. What I did want, however, was just a way to power up my Signy a little bit. So that way I could do 3/3/1 turns that I liked better, like for example, Phalaris and maybe Amino Acid, right? Now, what that would do then is it would leave me with my level 1s, like Yuki, at not high enough to stop a Machina. So what Eins does here is allows it to basically be a spell where I can power up Yuki over the threshold, 5,000, right, to be now it's a 13k, and that will allow me to defy most red and black Elrig kill effects, right? So that's why I ended up with this, or level 2s, you know, Akifukus or Caesars, you know, helping them get out of certain ranges is nice too. Chirins as well. So that's why we ended up with needing to run some of these. It actually is a very good effect at the low levels that I'm starting to really like. Even in my X deck, you'll see I've added something similar to this. But that's it. Other than that, still sort of the same classic bang rock deck that just is like sits here, says I'm not gonna lose the game. I'm just gonna sit here and keep doing my thing, and eventually I'll win the game. So we've added Tomago here. Tomago is another one where I don't love the MC Lion disrespect combo here for it, but I'm don't really know exactly what I want to replace it with. I think a 3-stop's pretty important in this deck in particular. There's a world where you switch over to Yuka Yuka, I suppose, because Yuka Yuka has a 2-stop. You could assume do Donna, not the coins ones. You could basically do Donna, and it's fine, I think. But we did swap over to being an Esper deck, so that way we can run this Ultra Superpowers. It's just too powerful. And Tomago needs to have damage output, and it relied really heavily on getting the Phalaris out to do the damage output. Now it doesn't have to. It's got Ultra Superheroes to do it. So it's because it's less reliant on Ultra or on Phalaris. It's just a better deck. Running some Exias as well to close out lanes is just really worth it. Outside of that, the deck has pretty much maintained the same that it has been. It's pretty tight on blue enter nowadays, which is fine because we're less reliant on blue enter as well. So yeah, it's got another Tama in here just as another way of being a discard outlet. I think that changes to Miko in the next set. But yeah, I think it's actually a pretty solid deck. You still can be running it. It's still A tier. It is a control deck, you know. It's not proactive in the slightest. It's really reactive. But I still think it's a great deck. You could be running it, still running the Bradamante because it wants over the Monoman because it wants card advantage and it has a hard time keeping its card advantage. So yeah, that's the Tomago deck. Still a very strong A tier deck, if I do say so myself. And then let's get into the last bits. So we've got Deus Team Aggro and X Team Aggro. These are basically the same. I'm just going to scroll through the difference of Deus real quick because I think I like X better. But Deus runs nothing that's really an advantage over it. It's got some Animirages, for example. It is able to run more Tamas, and it has a little bit more Bernices. But outside of that, it's pretty much the same deck that you'd be running for X Aggro. So let's go ahead and look at X Aggro, and we'll bite down a little harder into X Aggro. So what was X Aggro's major increase this game around here? Well, it's Yuzuki. Yuzuki gives you an out. First off, lets you play less Celebres, which is nice because it has the same ability, so you're basically just swapping it. But it has an ability where auto at the beginning of your attack phase, if you pay 3, the opponent puts 2 cards from their end zone into the trash if they had 4 or more. This is just a good way. You're basically tying this along with... You'd rather tie this along with something like your 2 Kintokis or things like that of those natures to basically blow your opponents out of being able to stop their 3 stops. And you can more efficiently do it with Yuzuki than you can with Fornax. Fornax is there, though, for some of those earlier turns that where you are actually... There's a lot of times where you're using Fornax less as a enter disruption and more as a way to just have no cards in your hand. Because against the discard decks, often X will just go to 0 cards in hand and just say, yeah, your cards are useless versus me. You see here that I've added the Truck Mixer here, only as a one-of. This is something you can get back with Trigger Victory, by the way. I actually don't mind getting this back with Trigger Victory. The fact that you can give a red card on top of this plus 2,000 and push it over that Machina mark, right, where this turns into 14k, etc. That can be very, very, very helpful, right? A lot of the times I was leaning on Thoroughbred to do that for my team, but I wanted a different 3-3 split. So the fact that you can do this with like a 3-3-1 split, right? Not even the 1. The 1 can be anything because you can put Truck Mixer on any of those things that are weaker. Right? You can pair it with Tama or you can pair it with Nobunaga and put these turns out where you've got Nobunaga, Tengu, and then like, I don't know, a Kentucky or something and buff the Kentucky. These are the really important stuff that you want to be trying to look towards. So yeah, that's the main changes with the X deck that you could be running, but it's all more or less the same deck. It didn't have major upgrades, but it had some minor upgrades. And then the last one to go over here is Atomic Deus. Okay, so Atomic Deus has not had very many upgrades either. It has some minor ones, though. So you could, it is an Esper deck. You could go with Ultra Superheroes, and I would not fault you for taking out Garden of Singularity and putting Ultra Superheroes in here, or taking out Xenocluster and putting Ultra Superheroes in here. The cool thing with Deus is because of its ability, you really only, you want incredibly powerful pieces, but they're fine if they're narrow, right? And that's something that I like leaning into with this deck, which is why I have Garden of Singularity. You get rid of it against the discard matchups, and you have Xenocluster, you get rid of it against the decks that aren't threatening your discard or your aren't threatening you with discard or aren't threatening your enter. I like both those options, but the major upgrade for this deck really is just that nothing. The major upgrade is I ended up going into Esper and playing Yuki Yuka Peiran for just the ability to put a 3-3 split, and that 3-3 split has, generally speaking, been 2 H2Os and 1 Exia, or 2 H2Os and 1 Phalaris. That's been the splits that I've been using. Outside of that, the deck has not really gained anything. It's just gotten slimmer in terms of its package of, what am I calling it? Atoms. It's gotten less atoms overall. And I really liked Caesar in the deck, by the way. Caesar is almost like always a turn 2 damage with Assassin, which is pretty cool. And in the late game, you can bring it back, and often people will be sitting at 1 enter or 2 enter, and you've got, like, you go Soul, plus Assassin. I'm not giving you any enter, and now you can't grow. I'm attacking you for lethal. That is a common, way more common play than you'd expect in this type of deck. It's really flexible. It doesn't necessarily enter starve efficiently, but it can enter deny for a turn pretty efficiently. So no major changes in this deck. I just kind of brought it up to be an example of, like, yeah, I'm not running. This is the only Esper deck I'm not running the Ultra Superheroes for, and here's my reasoning why. But I wouldn't fault you for running that. Anyways, guys, that is the rundown of, like, the top tier decks that you could be playing in Wixoss right now. I think I've gone through all of them that you could pretty efficiently do in set 8. If you want to peek to set 9, go ahead and do that through my Life Burst podcast window. And it'll be linked below on how to get to that as well. So without any further ado, may you always flip a Life Burst. Bye, guys.